has written as well to the Home Affairs Department about it. It has advised the department to adopt what it calls an intersectional approach. The centre says it's concerned about the omission of domestic partnerships from the legislative framework in the bill. Let's hear their views now. Charlene May from the WLC joining us now. Charlene, good afternoon. We've just heard the position of the ACDP. What do you at the centre mean that you want this bill rather to adopt an intersectional approach?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us. When we talk about intersectionality, what we're really saying is that, and I think the previous speaker pointed out that we're really a diverse society in South Africa. And when our focus is specifically on women, and that when we talk about women, we recognize that women are very different. They come from different backgrounds, different religions, different cultures, different race groups. But we also know that women within South Africa are situated in a very particular space that is often a vulnerable space because of the high levels of discrimination that we have in the country that's based on gender. But we also know that discrimination intersects with each other, and that women very often will experience different forms of discrimination, and that it will impact them in very different ways. And so what we've tried to do in our submission to the department is to illustrate to them that this legislation that they're seeking to introduce really does need to speak to the lived realities and the lived experiences of women if it is going to have a lasting impact. And if it is going to address the discrimination that women face in their interpersonal relationships, whether that is marriage or whether or not that is in domestic partnerships, that's what's important for us. And that's really a very short summary of what we mean with intersectionality.
Yes. So you want domestic partnerships as a sector, so to speak, or as a part of our life to be recognized in this bill, and currently it is not.
It's currently not. And the reality that we face, Dan, is that there's millions of South Africans that are living in cohabitative relationships, domestic partnerships, whether you want to call it a life partnership. In many cases, we know in our country, people think that common law marriage is legally recognized and that they have rights that flow from this relationship. And that's not the case. And so it leaves women, especially Black African women, in particularly vulnerable positions to have this form of interpersonal relationship not recognized within our legal framework. Our courts over the last few years have done a lot of work in recognizing domestic partnerships and saying that these partnerships really fulfill the same function and role within our society as a marriage. Yeah. And so even if
there are no children involved?
Even where there's no children involved, because having children is not necessarily a sign of a commitment or necessarily a sign of a family. Two people can make up a family. And it's actually good that you're asking that question, right? Because it points to the diversity and the richness of how family life gives expression.
Now, Charlene, the bill was published, this draft marriage bill was published, let's say, seeks to consolidate 3 different pieces of legislation, was published for comment in July up to the end of August. Did you, as a Women's Legal Centre, participate in that? And what do you know will be the next steps? I don't know what you're planning to do. The ACDP is planning to protest on Friday to put its case across very publicly. What are you planning to do as a Women's Legal Centre to push for this domestic partnerships inclusion in this bill?
Importantly for us is that we welcome the step to have legal recognition of all forms of marriages and partnerships in our country. So for us, it's not the time to protest. For us, it's the time to work with the department as much as possible to ensure that we give that legislative protection to parties, to women, to couples who don't have that legal recognition currently. We know that there are marriages, religious marriages, such as Muslim marriages and Hindu marriages, that currently are not legally recognized, that falls outside of a framework. And
do you want those to be included as well?
So those are included. That's what the department is saying to us. The department is saying we've compiled legislation now to address the legacy of apartheid on our family law framework. We want to recognize all of these relationships that previously racial apartheid, discrimination, that excluded. We want to bring it under one umbrella. So we can only welcome a move such
you
as
say
that.
Yours now is not to protest, you are telling us. So what are you planning to do?
Well, we've made the submissions to the department. It is now still in the departmentary phase. The bill and our submissions will now be considered by the department. The bill will come back for public participation once it is lodged with Parliament. And then there'll be a second opportunity for us all, I guess, as society, to engage in the process. And we'll continue to remain open to the department. We continue to try and seek avenues for us to consult and engage with them, to take on board the views that we've expressed and the views that our courts have expressed, and that our courts have mandated the department to take on board. And so the importance for us is to ensure that we protect those gains and that we're able to see them brought to life within the legislation.
When you say you're protecting gains, it suggests that the Home Affairs Department is listening to you.
Well, hopefully it's listening to us, but hopefully it's also listening more to the courts, right? So the legislation comes at the tail end of litigation and comes at the tail end of a court order. The Constitutional Court in last year ordered the Department of Home Affairs to enact legislation to recognize Muslim marriages. And they've had 12 months so far of that order. The order has an expiry date of 24 months. So come June next year, the department will have to deliver legislation that recognizes Muslim marriages. And that's why we say that we welcome the fact that they're busy with the process, because it shows the level of accountability and an attempt to adhere, we believe, to the courts and to the orders that have been handed down.
Yeah, what you say to me makes a lot of sense, but we'll see what lawmakers make of it. I need to get your view as a Women's Legal Center. One of the key features, Charlene, of this draft marriage bill, which is still in the works, as you've just eloquently explained, is outlawing marriages for anybody below the age of 18. This should protect our children. This should enable society in South Africa to deal with underage marriages.
It should. And it's been in the pipeline for a very long time. The restriction has come up periodically, ranging from amendments to the Children's Act, for instance, that's not seen fruition. And so it's important for us, not just because we have international obligations that we need to attend to in terms of addressing child marriage, but also we have an obligation to the children in our country, especially our young girls, because we know that child marriage has such a devastating impact on their ability to access education and healthcare and to make decisions about their bodies and how they, intend on living their lives going forward. We want to be able to give them a brighter and a better future. And for us to do that, we need to be legally certain that in the country we won't allow children to marry.
Thank you very much. Charlene May, for your time. She's from the Women's Legal Center, just weighing in, of course, on this draft marriage bill.